Welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, September 18th, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about the national stage and Donald Trump's approval rating amongst Latino voters dwindling and dwindling as the days go on. Donald Trump revealing new warning signs from this brand new poll that Politico was able to obtain across a multitude of others in a variety of different ways, showing that the president and the way that his base and supporters have viewed him over time has started to see a massive downturn. And this time in particular, a key voting group for Democrats and Republicans, Latino voters across the country who dwindled away in terms of their support for the Democratic Party in the 2024 election, now seem to be abandoning Donald Trump in record numbers that have not been seen in quite some time in the day and age of Donald Trump's second administration. Donald Trump's approval rating amongst Latino voters has largely risen since 2016 to 2020 and then even in 2024. The way at which the majority of this nation had viewed Donald Trump going into the 2024 election wasn't super positive, but it actually was higher in position than where it was in 2020 and 2016. And it was that type of energy and change in opinion and sentiment that really drove a multitude of different groups to support Donald Trump when in the past they historically had not. In 2016, Donald Trump resoundingly lost the vote amongst black voters, Asian voters, Latino voters. But in 2024, massive gains in favor of the president, especially amongst Latino voters in primarily states that really do have high portions of its voting electorate self-identify as Hispanic or Latino. And you will have found that in the 2024 election, it is those states that swung the most. And that's why there's this hyperfixation on support amongst Latino voters for Donald Trump really changing over time, because it was integral in Donald Trump's success in the last cycle. You will find here that a multitude of the states that Donald Trump targeted really did shift in his favor, especially even compared to the 2016 election, when oftentimes he was, in an upset back then. This time around, it felt more like it was expected. And a big reason for that was because the sentiments amongst voters had largely changed in the 8 years between Donald Trump's first run and his third run. And in these states that saw the most massive swings, it wasn't the Rust Belt, where Donald Trump took states the Democrats had won back-to-back elections for 24 consistent years in 2016 that shifted even further towards the right. It was the states in the Sun Belt that had high portions of Latino voters in the states like Texas and Florida and Arizona and Nevada, that experienced the largest shifts amongst any type of voting group in this country, as well as any other swing state across the map. And even when it comes down to a county basis, you will find that it is these Democratic regions that did actually hold off a little bit in terms of how their vote was swinging. Yes, Republicans did better in the overwhelming majority of counties in Texas, but where they did the best and where they shifted, the majority of the 13 counties that shifted over 15 points to the right, came across the southern border, across border counties that had bordered with Mexico. And you have found here that these are counties, every single one of these that shifted by 15 points or more to the right, have a Hispanic population of 50% plus. And it is not just alone in Texas that you found it. You found it in Arizona, you found it in Nevada, and even in states like California, where there's a high percentage of Latino voters. Massive changes overnight, and we know this. It's extremely well documented. But now looking at the most recent data points that we've been seeing across the country, the signs have really always been there. On the national stage, Donald Trump's approval rating isn't amazing. He's down 5 points nationwide, and that's just according to Real Clear Politics, which already skews towards the right. Almost any other mainstream source will tell you that Donald Trump's approval rating is -9, -10, and -11. But the real driving factor here for Donald Trump as to why voters are largely discontent with him is the issue of the economy. Voters are very upset with the current state of the economy, and arguably they have a reason to be. Prices are not lower than where they were when Donald Trump took office, and a lot of the same things that Biden was blamed for, Donald Trump is now blamed for as well. The rising cost of everyday goods, inflation across the board, all of these tariffs that voters very clearly know just aren't working to the degree that Donald Trump promised that they would, and it is taking an immense toll on the way that voters view him on issues like inflation, where he's down 20 points, or the economy, where he's down 14 points and contributes to the overall negative approval rating. And that is the key amongst Latino voters. What this most recent poll has told us is that it isn't an issue of social issues. And it's not even arguably as much of an issue on immigration as we have seen impact Donald Trump's approval rating in 2017, 2018, 2019. Immigration is actually one of the higher ends in terms of where Donald Trump's approved on, a complete flip from where we were 8 years ago in 2017, when the polling data had indicated that Donald Trump actually was largely approved of on the issue of the economy. But when it came down to the issue of immigration, a lot of voters were very upset. Now that we're seeing it flipped, you would think, okay, well, if immigration, which Democrats have made this argument, is disproportionately affecting minority Americans to a greater degree, wouldn't it make sense for every single minority group in this country to actually favor Donald Trump more if the issue that is being said matters most to them is not as negative for Donald Trump as it otherwise might be? But that's where I think we really get lost in the weeds here. Like many Americans across the board here, we have come to understand that it isn't just a singular issue that compels people to support a candidate or not. It's a variety of them. And in the 2024 election, we saw that the most important issue then was the economy, and that the most important issue now is also the economy. And when taking a look at what this most recent data point is telling us, like I said, it isn't any other factor largely but the economy that is showing that voters just don't like him across the board on this issue, and it is driving down the way that they view him. Latino voters in the most recent survey here view Donald Trump negative 20 points, and in terms of job approval, this is separating the character from the oath of office and actually executing it, it drops down to even worse, negative 23. Negative 20 on favorability, negative 23 in terms of overall job approval rating. And that's not a great place to be. It's a very, very bad metric to look at, and a big reason for it that if you look further down on the chart here, almost entirely has to do with the issue of the economy, where Donald Trump is down 26 percentage points amongst Latino voters. That is fascinating. When you take a look, too, at just the different demographics, where Donald Trump actually had made some minor gains from February to May, you will find it, for instance, amongst men, where the male demographic group amongst male Latino voters had a net positive, net negative, overall zero net approval for Donald Trump in February, +5 in May, and now is -5, roughly a 10-point swing in a matter of months. Voters ages 18 to 29 go from -11 in May to -34 in September. Women go from -36 to -34, not much of a change there. And independent Latinos, swing voters here that fit, right in the middle of the political spectrum, -21 to -31, a 10-point reduction, again, in a matter of months. And on that issue of the economy, more negative in every single bracket than where he was before, and that is the real problem here for Donald Trump, that on the issues that he ran on and championed in the 2024 election, voters are largely abandoning him, and Latino voters are too. And when we think about the way at which we have seen the president conduct, response to economic criticism from leading economists across the country, it has largely been denial, denial, denial. On every issue point, he says that it's fake news or it doesn't make sense, and gaslighting, and I know that term is, not used lightly here, but I think that when we talk about the way at which Donald Trump has engaged with the voting base, with his own base, with independent voters, with swing voters going into the midterm cycle and even this 2025 cycle, it has been met with hostility towards any type of critique of his economic plans and economic vision for the nation, because voters are not thrilled. Again, they feel the same things that everybody else does, that we still see the rising cost at the grocery store. Gas prices are not down. These tariffs aren't working, and nobody, and I mean nobody, wants to pay more for average household goods. And that is the reality that we are facing. And when we think about what it means in terms of actual electoral progress for Donald Trump, well, the Republican Party had been making major gains amongst Latino voters, and Donald Trump largely helped with that. Without Donald Trump, I imagine that the margins amongst every single demographic group that isn't white voters would have been significantly worse for the GOP had it not been for Donald Trump really championing this populist economic-first strategy that very clearly resonated with a lot of voters. Not even just minority voters in general, all voters across the country. That's why we saw improvements for the President of the United States in the last cycle. But going into the next midterm cycle, it does beg the question, if Latino voters who in February of 2025 approved of Donald Trump, -12 net approval, not phenomenal, but again, this is a month into the presidency, and even then, Donald Trump did not win Latino voters in the last cycle. He certainly did a lot better than Romney did, than even he did in 2016. But thinking about what it looks like in 2026, if this trend line continues, you will see a massive, massive reversion away from the Republican Party amongst a key demographic that Republicans are relying on for victory in the 2026 midterms. And when you take a look at a lot of the states that they've really tried to focus on in 2026, a great example is a state like Texas, where they've redrawn the congressional boundaries here to give Republicans 5 additional seats. But what they are counting on is that the swing in map from 2020 to 2024 is likely to maintain itself in a lot of these counties. They drew more conservative maps, but the point here is that a lot of the areas that had significantly, I would say, stronger amounts of support for Democratic candidates, largely because of minority voters, are now starting to see that change. Now starting to see that downturn in 2024, might see it reverse in favor of Democrats in the 2026 cycle. And when I think about the states that really could find, massive exoduses from Republican voting groups and by Latino voters could really do damage, I think about states like Florida. I think about states like Texas. I think about states like Colorado. And I think about a multitude of states that are going to be decided by just a handful of 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 votes that are going to be made all the difference by who is able to win on the margins, different demographic groups across their states. And what we have found thus far is that Donald Trump is not doing the Republican Party any favors at all. And thinking about the way in which voters view him, it isn't just Latino voters. It's voters at large who are abandoning him on the issue of the economy, on the issue of foreign policy, on the issue of inflation, on the issue of crime, and even the issue of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as detailed by Real Clear Politics in every single metric point. Not great for Donald Trump, and certainly even worse for Republicans who have to face the electoral ramifications and repercussions of a president who is dwindling in popularity, and a base and a group that Donald Trump really did believe he was ushering in a new era of Republican dominance over a key demographic. It just simply may not happen because the president is not delivering in a way that he promised. Not on the economy, not on immigration, not on foreign policy, not on any of the top issues to voters in the last cycle. And many of them will not reward the Republicans in the 26 midterms and instead will either stay at home or vote for the Democrats. Because that's the way elections work, and that is the way that voters can push back against the president of the United States and tell him that they disagree with the way in which he is handling his oath of office. And ultimately, what Politico has revealed is exactly what we've seen across the board, just more on a scaled down level, individual to a unique demographic group that has turned away from the Democratic Party in years past, that might start turning back in favor of the left if Donald Trump continues to drive them away. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 House election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.